What it do, Mushroom Crew? SMC. Super Mario Crew, sit down. Time for another video. Today we're going to be reacting to the top 4 most overrated players of the 2020 season. We're watching Crispy Flake's reaction. Oh wait, hold on a second. What it do, Mushroom Crew? SMC. Super Mario Crew, sit down because it's time for another video. Today we got reacting to the top 4 overrated players of the 2020 season, and we got Crispy Flakes right here. Or watching another one of his reactions. Now that I think about it, I don't know if I put myself over here because I just did the intro, saw that Crispy was right here, so I'm like, I'm probably gonna have to move myself. So I moved myself over here. Hopefully Crispy doesn't come over there, or else, like, I don't know what to do. But top 4 most overrated players. I think I've reacted to one of these by King of the Fourth Quarter like a few months ago. And I kind of edited the thumbnail, if you noticed, who I think could be overrated. And I'll give you 4 players that I think are overrated right now. I think one that's obvious and that we're all noticing right now is probably Draymond Green. He's more of a system guy. I could explain probably at the end, but yeah, 2, and Crispy probably wouldn't like this, or maybe he would now because he's gone, but I would say Andre Drummond. I feel like Andre Drummond doesn't really have like that motor to, like, you know, go and do something. He's kind of a lackadaisical defender. He's a great rebounder. I'll give him that. He's a really good offensive rebounder. And he has good strength. But in terms of basketball skill, I don't think he has that much compared to most centers. There might be some centers that are seen as worse than him that I mean are probably more skilled. Third one, I'd probably have to say Mike Conley. I think we're noticing it this year. It's really funny because a lot of people have said he's been underrated for a long time. Some people think he's the best player to never be an all-star. I've never been a believer in Mike Conley. I'm going to say that. Now, he's a good player. He's a solid point guard. He could be a championship-level point guard, but he can't be a first, a second, maybe not even a third option on a championship team. And, I mean, we're seeing it right now when he's on a really good team. Like, his role starts to, like, go back. Like, he can't be a number 1, number 2 guy like how Zach Randolph or Marc Gasol were for the Grizzlies in the grit and grind era. And the 4th one I have, a lot of you are probably going to be really confused, but I've said this for a while. I've said Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now, let me get at this real quick. Yes, I know Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's been really good this year. He's made big strides. I believe he's like nearly doubled his points per game average. But the point of the matter that I'm saying about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is that a lot of people are like comparing him to like a Magic Johnson prototype with a better jump shot. And when people say that, I'm like, absolutely not, because that's like way too far. Now listen, I've made a claim years ago, back in like 2014, saying that Andrew Wiggins would never be an all-star. And it's 2020, and he's never been an all-star. Now, I also have gone on the record saying that I don't think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will be an all-star. I could be very wrong about this. This is just my opinion. I don't think he's ever going to reach that, like, level. I think his passing is okay. It's not really anything spectacular. He has a lot of defensive potential, but definitely could improve if he wants to be even in a sentence with Magic Johnson. He does have a good jump shot, but I wouldn't say a great one. He definitely can hit the 3, though. And, I mean, it's also a different era because you have to look back at maybe he would be able to hit it back in Magic's era or whatever. But personally, I don't think he's ever going to reach Magic status. And, I mean, we're not just comparing the Magic. I don't even think he'll ever reach, like, the status of point guards that are, like, Hall of Fame level but are just not, like, spectacular, such as, like, Dave Bing or Bob Cousy. He might not even be on their level. Some people will disagree because of, like, the eras, whatever. I don't care. We're going to watch this. I kind of went on my rant probably for like 4 or 5 minutes. Don't really know. But Let's just watch.
Flakes, sir, welcome to
See if I got any right.
Before today's video, we got a video by Young Mustard, linked to his channel description below.
Young Mustard,
titled "The Top 4 Overrated Players of the 2020 NBA Season." Always controversial whenever
sorry, but I don't watch Young Mustard,
because
but
that means that
I
people
do
out
watch
there think
Crispy
that
Flakes.
players properly rated, right, guys?
But now we're all gonna watch
So before
Young
we get
Mustard.
going on today's video, guys, we are getting so close to 100K subscribers. There's like 56% of you that watch my videos and subscribe, man. Now is the time to do it. Please help me grow the channel. I appreciate it. And here we go, man. Top 4 overrated players of the 2020 NBA season.
Without further ado, let's get...
Who do you guys think it is? Name them in the comment section below. I'm going to say, I'm not going to guess because I saw a thumbnail.
I need my
on
4.
with this video,
know if those
starting
are
with
exact.
number 4. Coming in at number 4, we have the one and only Paul George.
Paul George,
is
really?
one of the better two-way players
Wow.
in the NBA.
Let's hear him
a
out.
20-point per game scorer that can go out there and defend at an elite level and can also give you some solid offensive production. But the problem that I see with Paul George is that a lot of people look at the Clippers as juggernauts, and the two names that they mention are Kawhi Leonard
I think it's their depth mostly, but that's
as
just
they
me.
should, because those are the two best players on the team, not just because of what they provide offensively, but also defensively. But when I look at Paul George this season, I think a lot of people are not realizing that he has been very inconsistent, because during the first half of the season, Paul George put up relatively solid numbers of 23 to 24 points per game, 6 rebounds and 4 assists.
Well, we also look at that too, but you also look like, because he's talking about 2020 NBA season, he's not saying Paul George is overrated, just maybe overrated this season, right, guys? Because you look what he was doing last year in OKC, this man was literally like in the running for MVP. He was like top 5 MVP votes or something like that, or at least he should have been.
Top 3.
While shooting
crazy last
40% from the field, around 40% from 3, and
People blew that a little
91%
bit out of
from the
proportion.
free throw line. And those are really good numbers. We all know what Paul George is capable of putting up. But when you look at the numbers that he has put up since he's returned from his injury in January, yeah, those numbers are not great. He's averaging 17 points, 4 assists, and 5 rebounds, while shooting 43 to 44% from the field, 41% from 3, and 81 to 82% from the free throw line. And those numbers are not bad. The efficiency is even better in
Just
certain
so many
areas,
offensive
such as
options
the
on the
3-point
team.
percentage in comparison to the first half. But the problem that I see is that when a lot of people talk about how great the Clippers are, Paul George is held in a regard as if he is a superstar, and I just don't think he is that anymore. His offensive productivity...
I don't think it's not that he's not a superstar. I just don't think he needs to be a superstar on the Clippers. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but just like straight up, it's like, because last year he was asked to do so much. Russell Westbrook had a great season last year with OKC, and kind of deferred a little bit to Paul George, which is what he should have done, right? But like besides for that, I mean, there wasn't too much going on with the Thunder last year, so Paul George really had to take over. Like, I could see Paul George really putting the team on his back with Kawhi Leonard come playoff time, assuming we get to see the playoffs. But I think regular season, just based off like injury history and stuff like that, I think he's just kind of coasting the season, letting Lou Williams and guys like that score the basketball. So I do think we'll see playoff P come playoff time.
Over the last month of the
But I get what he's saying.
was that of Montrezl Harrell. Montrezl Harrell was actually even contributing more in terms of points per game over the last 15 to 17 games of the season. And I'm sorry, I know Paul George is a really good player, but a superstar does not get outscored by a bench player on his own team. I don't care if he's going to win the Sixth Man of the Year or not.
Well, I mean, LeBron's seen as the best player in the league by a lot of people still, and he got outscored by Jason Terry. Sorry, LeBron fans, but I had
He's
to say
as
it.
good as a lot of people said he was coming into the season, and how they were boosting this Clippers team because of their dynamic duo of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Then I think that we need to have that same energy.
I do like how they run it
Paul
better
George
now.
is not living up to those expectations on the offensive
With,
side of the ball. Especially
everybody
when
doing
you
the
talk
part.
about teams like the Lakers, who have juggernauts on the offensive side, such as LeBron and Anthony Davis. Paul George can't be this inconsistent. And if it is injuries that is causing Paul George to be like this, then so be it. But that is a part of Paul George. Paul George has always been an injury-prone player, and we saw it in OKC.
Well, that's another thing to attest to the Clippers' depth is that I don't think the Lakers have nearly as much depth as the Clippers do. So I mean, LeBron, AD, they can't have those games where they just chill like Paul George does. You got Marcus Morris or Reggie Jackson or Lou Williams, Montrezl to back you up. Of course, the Lakers got a really good deep squad. But I think that there's more weight on LeBron and AD's shoulders overall.
And we're seeing it right now with the Clippers. And when you look at the entirety of Paul George's career, he has struggled to be a second option on teams. We saw it in 2017 when he was with Russell Westbrook, and he was very inconsistent, and we're seeing it right now with the Clippers. I think Paul George's game flourishes more when he is the #1 option. That's just me. I think the inconsistencies are going to continue, and if that happens in the postseason, I would not be surprised, especially considering Paul George's playoff history. The point of me bringing up Paul George in this video is basically to say, coming into this year, we viewed Paul George as a top 10 player in the league. But right now, can you even make that kind of argument anymore? Because we already got young guys that are passing up Paul George, such as Luka Doncic. And how soon is it going to be before a guy like John Morant, Zion Williamson, Trae Young, all those guys will pass Paul George up, especially if these inconsistencies continue in his game. But moving on to player number 3.
Okay, now here's what I'll say about Paul George. For one, saying he's not a superstar anymore, I think is kind of a bit absurd. I believe he's like, what, 30? Like, a lot of players are in their prime from about age 27 to 32, 33. He's still got a lot more years left of being at his peak. Like a year ago, after how many games he had played, because now like we're kind of in this like hiatus thing, and he had that shoulder injury. But a year ago, after how many games he had played, like he was playing like an MVP. You know, like saying, that's like saying that Derrick Rose was overrated. The year after he won MVP, when he was still an All-Star. Still seen as a top 2 point guard in the league. You know, it was either like him or CP3. We literally watched that video. And he was still seen as like a top 5 player, I believe. So I don't think that, and to bring up the fact of his history as a second option, we've only seen that once. And it was playing with Russell Westbrook, a person I'm not really too fond of, in terms of like trying to get places to win a championship. Now, if Westbrook is the second guy and Paul George is the first guy, then you have a better option or a better opportunity. We saw that last year, but of course he had like the shoulder surgery, and I mean, really, like nobody could stop Damian Lillard. CJ McCollum also was playing really good, but I mean, Paul George, he was a little bit like of a shell of himself, still really good, but I'd say right now, I wouldn't say he's a top 10 player, maybe in the league. Because you also have to account for, you know, I'd probably say like Jimmy Butler is above him with what he's doing with the Heat this year. But I think he's still like top 15 because you also have to look at a lot of the players above him, such as, you know, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry. You know, he was right around Klay Thompson. Those guys have been injured like almost all year. So how can you keep them above Paul George or put them like lower? But like the only thing is that Paul George can get higher on the list, really, gaining an edge over them, like just those two compared one to another. And Paul George is a really good defender. See, I think a lot of people underrate Paul George's playoffs because a lot of the time, like they say him with the Pacers, like they mention his playoff P moments, getting first rounded. He didn't have hardly any help around him, like in the second half of his Pacers tenure. And he came back from a horrible leg injury. And yeah, it took him some games that first year. He was kind of slow to like get back to himself. But the next season, he was playing like an all-star, probably playing better than he ever had. And he didn't really have much around him. He had like Rodney Stuckey and, you know, CJ Miles. And like, I'm sure you guys remember that team. Like, it wasn't like David West anymore. It wasn't Lance Stevenson. It didn't have Danny Granger. No Roy Hibbert. Those teams were bad. They probably shouldn't have been a playoff team, those later Pacers teams. And he was going off in the playoffs himself, but nobody ever talks about that. And, I mean, he made the conference finals twice in his first 4 years. So, I don't know. I think people underrate Paul George's playoff history in that regard. And, I mean, he wasn't playing that bad last year, given the circumstances he was going through. Of course, the only thing that was really notable that he's done that was kind of like, wow, like that wasn't really good, was the 5-point game against the Jazz. And I mean, like he helped like spark him and Westbrook helped spark that comeback the game before that. So to avoid losing in 5, I don't know. I think in that
I got
regard,
Hassan
yeah.
Whiteside, and we're also going to
good choice. Hassan Whiteside. It's not that. Just my opinion. I don't think Hassan Whiteside's a bad player. I just think the way that Hassan Whiteside contributes to the game of basketball is no longer really like viewed upon as something that's needed. Like you no longer really need those inside centers that I don't know, man. It's like you can get by with so much like with so much less. You know what I'm saying? Like the Golden State Warriors years, you have like Kevon Looney and guys like that. So Hassan Whiteside, he puts up good numbers, but I think he's like the definition of empty stats.
to talk about number 2, which is Andre Drummond. The reason I decided to lump both of these guys together is because as great as these guys can put up.
I already talked about Drummond. I'm gonna just talk about Whiteside right now. Personally, I don't think he's overrated because if you look at Whiteside, like one, he's leading the league in blocks per game right now. I know blocks per game not really the greatest stat to go off like for your defense. But a lot of players, like when they shoot over him inside, like they're almost like scared to shoot over him, or he's not the greatest in the pick and roll game. I'll give you that. He's not a great perimeter defender, but as an interior defender, he's probably a top 5-10 player in the league in doing that. He has post moves that he can do. I'd say better than Drummond. I think his mid-range shot is better than Drummond, and I think he knows his skills, which is a big thing because sometimes you'll watch either Cavs games or Pistons game earlier this year, and Drummond would just be like bringing the ball up the court and turn it over because he'd think he'd be like the point guard, or he'd shoot threes because he thinks like, oh, like we're up like 15 or like more times than not they're probably down 15. It's like we're down 15 anyways, we need points. Like I'm just gonna shoot a 3. Like Whiteside, I think he's rarely done that, and the other thing is that Whiteside also actually has a good 3-point percentage this year, which is kind of impressive, but way less volume than Andre Drummond. I think he knows his skills. That's why I'd say Whiteside is probably a top 10. I'd say he's a top 10 center in the league right now. Andre Drummond, I don't know if I can say that about him. Both are really good rebounders as well. But I just think that Whiteside has a more complete post game. He's a better defender inside. Pick and roll game, it's kind of indecisive sometimes, but I mean sometimes it's kind of hard because you never know if you have like a De'Aaron Fox that's going to be driving to the basket, or you never know if you're going to have like a Brook Lopez that you're going to have to step out on and guard for the 3-pointer. So it's tough because like the way the game's evolving. But like Crispy said, like those players, it's hard for them to find like a niche in today's game. But personally, I think Whiteside, he's actually done a pretty good job this season. I think he's probably more underrated than overrated this year because everyone was bashing him last year with the Miami Heat, and they just don't really watch like the Blazers games, and they're just going to keep bashing him. But I think Whiteside's actually done a pretty good job, filling the role for like Yusuf Nurkic, who's injured right now for Portland. Drummond hasn't really impressed me this year. His stats are nice. But he hasn't played like I said, like we already got into it. Like I said, there's a lot of players that are probably worse than him or seen worse than him, but are more skilled.
Numbers and all of that, let's be honest, they are just not impactful.
Yep,
and I wanted to talk a little bit about the traditional 5 and just how it's not that valuable in the NBA. For starters, let's look at Andre Drummond. He was on the trading market for a considerably long amount of time before he was traded to the Cavaliers. And look at the team that got him, the Cavs. It wasn't the Celtics who needed a center, and a lot of people said they should trade for Andre Drummond. It wasn't the Rockets who are deciding to put Robert Covington and PJ Tucker at the center instead, but it was the Cavs, a team that already has Tristan Thompson and Kevin Love in their front court, but then they decided to add a big piece such as Andre Drummond. And you want to know why? It's because his value is just not that high in the league. His contract is ridiculous, and if I'm being honest, if the Cavs are going to give him that max contract and overpay him,
the new mediocre
they
team
are
of the East.
retarded. But when you look at Andre Drummond, what does he do that a lot of
I'll say one more thing. Contract's a huge thing in this because a lot of people before the season were saying Chris Paul's overrated now because they looked at how much money he was making and what he was doing on the court. So a lot of that, like that is something that's probably more against Drummond. Maybe people wouldn't be saying that as much. I mean, in Whiteside's defense or case, like he's going to be a free agent, I believe, after the season. So not really too much there.
Other setters can't do. Look at Tristan Thompson and Andre Drummond. What is the big difference between both of those players? And the same thing goes for Hassan Whiteside, but the only difference with him is that he's an elite shot blocker. I'll give him that. But defensively, when you look at Hassan Whiteside and Andre Drummond, they are lazy. They have the physical tools to be great defenders, but they're just not.
Anytime my girlfriend watches the Pistons with me, that's what she always like says. Is like she just says like, Andre Drummond, he just looks lazy, like freaking always trotting down the court and stuff like that.
They both,
so
yeah, they both have moments where they play lazy.
Good take.
But does Joel Embiid not have moments where he plays lazy? Does Nikola Jokic not have moments where he plays lazy? Karl Anthony Towns? They all play lazy. That's why Shaq has said in this era it's like the cupcake era, because every single center in the league now, that's why the center position seems like it's like dying, because every single center in the league, like they don't play as like intense now. That's why I can say like, you know, easily like Whiteside's a top 10 center in the league. That's why Drummond still might be a top 10 center in the league too, given all this, because a lot of the centers just play lazy. I mean, he gets into like the passing or in the lanes, you know, for the pick and roll on offense. I just think a lot of it is like he can't really defend the perimeter. Which, I mean, that's something, too, with Rudy Gobert, who I think is slightly overrated in myself. So I guess 5 players. But, yeah.
Well, and they foul a lot. That does not contribute to wins. And I mentioned this earlier. Their motor is terrible. Both of these guys do not seem like they actually care about winning games. Andre Drummond does not play a lot of defense sometimes because he wants to pad his rebounding numbers. And when you look at Hassan Whiteside, I find it pretty funny that he's having a little bit of a resurgence year in Portland, the year that his contract is coming to a close.
Yes,
so
sir.
when I call that these players, they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. And I think that the Golden State Warriors indirectly have killed the value of guys like Andre Drummond and Hassan Whiteside in the NBA.
Which is why I'm very curious what happens with James Wiseman in the draft. I'm very curious what happens with him.
Because all you really need from a center is to defend. But
he has a decent mid-range game, I will say. He can't really stretch the floor like most centers today. He could always adapt. I mean, we saw Brook Lopez. He developed into a sharpshooting 3-point shooting big in like a year and a half. So it could always like change in the future, but right now I think he's okay. I think he's just about kind of like where DeAndre Ayton started off, and nobody's calling him a bust. So
the rim, get boards, hustle, and also catch some lobs and do some offensive moves here or there when you're required to. That's Kevon Looney. That's all you need from a center.
Yes,
and
sir.
Andre Drummond, Hassan Whiteside, these relics from the past, we need to leave them there, the past. But moving on to the final player that we have at number 1, I'm
not just saying like straight up like all these years, you know, all you had to do to get in the NBA or make like the basketball team stuff was be tall. And it's like, that's all you need to be done. But now it's like to the day where you don't really need that anymore. So these centers shouldn't be getting max contracts. You should be getting like damn like 3.2 million a season or something like that.
With
no longer needed.
Booker. Now,
a short
here we go.
yes.
This is part of the video where a lot of
Wait, what did you say?
Whiteside are worth $3 million.
I'm going with Devin Booker.
I hear this.
Here we go.
This is the one right here we're going to get roasted on the most.
The video where a lot of people are going to get angry.
Yep.
Devin Booker is a really solid young player
I like hot
in the
takes.
NBA. And I definitely think the all-star stuff, that was kind of sad that he didn't make the team, especially considering guys like Trae Young were in the starting lineup who have worse teams than his.
Right?
I definitely understand that argument. But when I look at Devin Booker and how bad that Phoenix Suns team has been for years, not just this year, but previous years in the past, when are we going to start giving him some culpability about how bad this Phoenix Suns team is over and over and over? And I know a lot of people's argument is usually talent not being on his team. But this year, you could kind of make that argument with DeAndre Ayton, but he still has other pieces on his roster. Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, Mikal Bridges, Dario Saric, Frank Kaminsky, Aaron Baines, Cameron Johnson.
To me, it's the same issue as the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that's just that they're in the wrong conference. If they were playing the Eastern Conference, probably a playoff team every single season, at least is like an 8 seed.
None of those players I mentioned are scrubs. They all contribute in a solid way to help a team win games. And when you look at Devin Booker's flaws, they are very noticeable. Defensively, he is not good whatsoever, doesn't even really show effort on that side of the ball, and when it comes to his shot selection, yeah, it's not very good. Sometimes he takes bad shots as if he's those guys at the rec that think that they're Kobe, and then when you look at his turnovers, he turns the ball over at an alarming rate, and it's damn near the exact same as it was last year, and it shouldn't be like that when you have Ricky Rubio to take that ball handling responsibility.
Yeah, if you're running things through Devin Booker, then this team should have never got Ricky Rubio in the first place. That's the thing, is Devin Booker's going to always want the ball in his hands, and Rubio is a guy that you play through just because of him being like the natural point guard and stuff like that. So I mean,
I'll say this. See, a lot of people, like, when they look at either a Michael Jordan prototype or like a Kobe Bryant prototype, a lot of them compare, like, there's two players today, or like maybe Dwayne Wade, whatever. There's like two players today that you look at, and I think the biggest ones are Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell. And there's people that think Devin Booker is getting hate, or not getting hate, or kind of like underrated because he's doing all this with this team and he just doesn't have much around him. And that Donovan Mitchell has the luxury of being with a guy like Rudy Gobert who anchors the defense, which he does to an extent. There's other people like myself who think that Donovan Mitchell, he's putting up these stats which are extremely important to the Jazz. Maybe don't seem as important this year now they have a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic, but regardless, he was still doing this his first and second year in the league and basically anchoring the offensive side. And, I mean, Devin Booker, like, when he's tried to do that, like, it doesn't really translate in wins because, I mean, yeah, you could probably take Donovan Mitchell off the Jazz right now with this team, and they could still be a playoff team. But if you look at him in the past, like last year before that, if you take Donovan Mitchell off the Jazz, I don't think they're a playoff team because they don't have enough offensive threats around him. Now you have Bogdanovic, you have, even though Mike Conley I said is overrated, I think he's still enough of a boost offensively, like a fourth option on the team. And they got some other bench pieces as well. Jordan Clarkson, they just got at the trade deadline, or before the trade deadline by a few months. So all that, I think Donovan Mitchell is a better player than Devin Booker. And Devin Booker, like they said, doesn't really try on defense. Mitchell's not the greatest defender, but at least he, gives effort usually. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. And yeah,
I think Rubio on the court with Devin Booker just hurts them more so than anything.
Away from you.
Like
So
a
there are no
Grant type of guy.
excuses why he turns the ball over the way that
Terry
he
Rozier.
does. The fact of the matter is,
Cody Zeller,
you
somebody
cannot
from
go
the
through
Charlotte
seasons
Hornets.
losing year after year after year. Your team is adding top picks from the draft year after year after year because you keep losing so much, and then your record is getting
Cam
worse,
Johnson was
but your
suspicious.
numbers are getting better. And Devin Booker does not get a pass for not making the playoffs. Because look at all the great young talent that are entering the NBA year after year. Whether it's John Morant taking the Grizzlies further than a lot of people expected.
That's a good
because
point.
nobody thought that
That's a
they would
great
make
point.
the playoffs. Or you could look at Zion Williamson already having a positive effect on the
Luka.
Pelicans and them pushing for a playoff spot before the season was canceled. Or you could look at Luka Doncic.
That is a great point. I mean, yeah, I have no argument for that. And it's not like the Memphis Grizzlies, or, obviously like the Pelicans, you got like Brandon Ingram and guys like that. And Devin Booker don't really got a player like that on his team. But I like more so like the Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson's cool. Why hasn't Devin Booker been able to lead to the playoffs?
Already in his second year, carrying the Mavericks to a playoff berth. At the end of the day, some type of responsibility must be put on Devin Booker's shoulders for why the Suns consistently fail year after year. I'm not saying he's the main problem, but he has to be a part of the problem. And something has to be said for players coming into the NBA that are younger than Devin Booker, that are already leading their teams to playoff contention. Meanwhile, Devin Booker's been in Phoenix for years and hasn't even sniffed.
Yeah, Booker and Luka would have been amazing.
But that concludes this video. Before I send you guys...
Yeah, I mean, like, think about it. Like, he's usually compared to Kobe, and Kobe played 20 years in the league, and Devin Booker's already in his fifth year. Excuse me, my throat is crazy. But he's already in his fifth year in the league, so he's about a fourth of the way through the length of Kobe's career, and he hasn't shown anything from it. I mean, he's one All-Star appearance by way of injury replacement, but other than that, he really hasn't done much. Now, I'm not trying to say he's more overrated than anyone else that I mentioned that was earlier. I think Devin Booker's a really good player. I think he's probably a top. I mean, I don't have the list in front of me right now, but just saying off the top of my head, maybe like a top 30 player in the league. That probably is about where he is. But yeah, teams like the Suns are like one of those teams that I feel for, where it's like something that you might just want not to happen, and then because it didn't happen, then it's like you're waiting so long for it to happen again. Because I'd like to see the Suns in the playoffs. They've been out of it so long. I believe the only team that's missed it longer is the Kings. Um, but I mean, I like the Suns with Steve Nash. He's my second favorite point guard ever. And then like once he left, I know they had that 1 year with Dragic and Bledsoe where they won like 48 games, and that team barely missed the playoffs. To think like that's crazy. 48 games won and you missed the playoffs. It's pretty insane. But I feel for that team specifically because now it's like you're going on 10 straight years of nothing. Uh, but yeah, I thought that this would be an interesting video. I think it was. Got a lot of talking into it. It was only like a 13 minute video, but I feel like I did a lot of talking. I wonder how long this is going to be. Yeah. But anyways, that's going to do it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm out. Peace.